Hey, everybody. It's another week, and I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for you. Thank you for rocking with us and tuning in like you do, for sharing and for your feedback, as always, right here on the Love Again podcast. I'm excited today. I have a friend of mine who's here, and I want to be honest. When I first thought about doing the podcast, she was one of the people I had in mind that I gotta talk to her. We talk privately all the time, but and we've done a couple of things. We've done a couple of streams before. Yeah, we've done a couple of streams live, but this gets to be my conversation. So I'm happy to have her here. Um, she is an activist, an author, a scholar, a culture critic. Um, a mother, um, an amazing Black woman that I've had the privilege to meet. Before I let her say hello, um, was thinking about our conversation today and thinking about when we first met. So we met about 11 years ago now. And I met you on Twitter. It's the craziest thing. I think I had just gotten on Twitter, and some kind of way you came up in my feed. Somebody I was following retweeted you, and I remember the day because you were going hard at Puffy.
Yeah.
You were like you were going at him, like you were going
Woo!
at Puffy about stealing people's publishing, and it was just like the most entertaining thing I had read, and I was like, oh, I gotta follow her. And when I followed you, I found out you had a blog, the good old days of Tumblr, right? Um, and you had recipes and essays and music. That's when I found out you're a Prince fan. So I was like, oh, this is absolutely wonderful. So we'll talk about Prince in a minute. Um, and you did book reviews,
Mhm,
and I think the Love Again hadn't come out yet. And
mhm.
I reached out to you, and I was like, hey, and I was very scared because I know social media could be a weird space, a scary space for women. So I was very, apprehensive about it. But I was like, hey, can I send you this book? It's coming out, if you like it. I hadn't let anybody really read it yet, and so I was like, I want to send it to you, and maybe you'll like it. And thank God you did.
I loved it.
Thank God. Thank God you did. And you wrote a wonderful review about it. And we have been friends ever since. And so for
You
the
had a
first
publicist at that time, right? I think you had somebody send it to me. There was somebody in between. It was a woman.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I
Good
think my
time.
my publicist, yeah, my publicist was getting out galley copies
Yeah.
or whatever, and I think I added your name
I was
to
like, well, who is this guy? Let me look
it.
him up. I saw these pictures. I was like, oh, he's kind of cute. That was really it. I was like, he's cute.
I appreciate it. Yeah, and whatever works. Like whatever, whatever, whatever works.
I was a
And
creep. I was being a creep.
yeah, and so thank you for that. I've thanked you over the years about that, but that's when our friendship started after that. And I'm grateful that I have the capacity to make friends and connect with people. And so for the first time on the pod, the one and only Feminista Jones. How are you?
Hi, I'm great.
Yeah.
That's actually probably my favorite introduction to this day.
Well,
You know, no, because here's what happens. People will read the bio and,
mhm.
all that kind of stuff. And some people that may have a personal connection may throw a little bit in, but they'll read all the other stuff. And if you've ever seen me at a speaking engagement, I usually, when they're reading my bio, I'm usually like this.
Cringing. Yeah, it's like,
It's like,
yeah,
I know I did this stuff. Like, who cares? Like, just let me just get up here and talk. So
right.
I actually really love that intro. I'm happy to be
Well,
here.
well, thank you,
I'm so
thank you.
glad you have a podcast. You were able to get this out. I remember when you first started talking about this too. So
I've been talking about it
good to
a
see
minute.
it.
I've been
I didn't know
talking
if he was
about
going to have me on. I was like, oh,
it. Right. I know.
what's happening here?
Yeah, yeah, I had a lot of stuff going on, but this year I came into it and I wanted to do it.
Yeah,
I'm glad I did it, and so
you have
thank
had a
you.
lot going on. I love you though. I
Well,
love you.
thank
I hope
you.
you know
Love
that
love you too. I love.
because it's been tough for you. I know.
Well, we've all been through some stuff,
Yeah,
haven't we?
yeah, yeah.
I want to start here. I ask all of our guests. First of all, how are you? How are you
I'm good.
doing?
I'm good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. We've been hearing some stuff out of Philly, and every time I hear something out of Philly, I think of you and
Just
when
remember that I left, so I'm good.
you got out
I
of the
moved across the bridge.
city.
You know, and I'll be honest. I'll be honest. You know, I wanted my kid to make it to 18, and I got to a point where I felt like he might not. So I had to
Mhm. Did what you had to do. I totally
I'm
get it.
still centered in Philadelphia. I still do work there. I'm still teaching there in school and stuff like that. So, but I moved across the bridge. I was like, so yeah.
It seemed like it was a very wise decision.
Oh, because Philly is off the chain right now. That's why.
Has it always been, or do you?
Yes, it has, but
Okay.
now it's even worse.
Okay.
But whatever. What were you gonna ask me?
Okay. I want to start here.
It's gonna be this whole time,
I
y'all. This
know.
whole time.
Yeah, this is gonna be it. It's gonna be it. Uh, I always ask our guests initially, like if you had to give your origin story,
Mm.
um, what would that be, and who are the people who added to that story for you?
That's such a great question. Oh, I've never been asked that. Okay. You get into Combat Jack territory.
Well,
He's
right.
an interviewer. Rest in peace, Reggie.
Mhm.
My origin story. It's fascinating. My dad had a crush on my aunt, and she didn't want him. And they dated for a little bit though, but didn't work out.
Mhm.
So he started hanging out with my mom, who was her younger sister, and they just became friends.
Mhm.
And they used to smoke a lot of weed together. And then one day in July, you know, and then here I am. So yeah, these like two friends, right? And so my families grew up, they were on the same street. So my
Mhm.
dad's family owned the local kind of, I guess, soda shop, you would call it, burgers and all kind of things. People would stop there after school and get the,
Mhm.
candy store, right?
Mhm.
That, had a grill. And so they owned that and they lived there. And then down the street was my mom and her family. And so my
Mhm.
grandparents were actually like everybody's friends already. But yeah, my parents were friends. They were
Mhm.
like weed smoking buddies,
Mhm.
and they had sex one night, and that was me. They had sex a few times, but
Yeah.
that's how I came to be.
Yeah, that main element kind of is kind
No,
of ubiquitous across all origin
no,
stories.
the weed is
Somebody
important.
somebody met somebody and
Yep,
somebody had
yep,
sex, and
yep.
then
And it's interesting because as much as I learned about my family stories, they had a lot of interaction beforehand.
Mhm.
Like, and I've got great stories about that. I'll tell you another time. But anyway, the families back then kind of still old fashioned, born in '79. They were like, y'all need to get married, and they were
Mhm.
like, no. So
Mhm.
they resisted it.
Mhm.
We were poor. I tell everybody all the time. I was born into poverty. My parents were struggling, um, and we lived in the projects basically for a little bit. And then my parents did get married, and then they got divorced a year later. And I think for me, that origin story has made me who I am because it's why I became like a social worker who fights against poverty and hunger and homelessness and things like that because I've experienced all those things, experienced them very young, and just never wanted anybody else to have to go through that. And that
Mhm.
became my motivation. And so my origin story, I would say definitely my dad, like he and I are not talking right now. We haven't talked in a few months
Mhm.
because you just kind of get to a place where like family is blood, but family is more than that. And if people have certain views and ideas about things that are harmful, I can't abide it.
Mhm.
But my dad was kind of in and out of my life.
Mhm.
And I think that that's so important to my origin story because it taught me that blood ain't everything. People choose their family, they choose who they want to show up for,
Mhm.
right? And so my mom showed up in the best ways that she could.
Mhm.
She had a lot of her own trauma. My mother passed away many years ago, but she had a lot of her own trauma.
Mhm.
And what I grew up quickly because I was her best friend at like
Mhm.
3, you know, um, and and our relationship had its ups and downs, but ultimately I'm like, this is the woman who made me who I am. She's the reason I could read at age 3. She's the reason that I became this kind of, and I tell people I'm brilliant all the time. It's because of my mom. Like she pushed to find every opportunity that I could have to do and be better than anything that she could dream of for herself.
Mhm.
And that is how I think all of this got started, by really having this mom who used to be in the Panthers, who was super feminist, who was super, hippie-ish almost,
Mhm.
loved music, was and introduced me to Prince. Like I heard that when I was born, Prince was playing in the labor room. So I've been a fan since '79. My mom really was super important. And for most of my life and stuff, it was just me and her.
Um, as a man,
Hmm.
I am amazed at the relationship between mother daughter.
Hmm.
Um, I've seen where it could get very complicated
Yes. Yeah.
and fraught, and
Mhm.
then I see in some relationships where the teenager grows up into young adulthood and they become friends, like
Mhm.
best friends.
Mhm.
In death, I think we surmise, who we love in ways. How do you? I mean, you gave us a little, but I wanted you to go deeper. How do you remember? How
Yeah.
do you remember your mom?
Yeah. I it's so funny because if you catch me on the wrong day, I won't talk about it. Right?
Mhm.
You caught me on a good day. I named my consulting company after my mother because I think that I'm doing everything that she always knew I could do.
Mhm.
Um, my mom was a lesbian.
Mhm.
My mom was stuck kind of growing up in this super Christian family that had its ideas about how people are supposed to be, and she was quite performative in it. But my mom was a lesbian,
Mhm.
and um, she got involved with a partner who sexually abused me. And so that was very hard to reconcile
Mhm.
because I'm like, you're my mom. Why aren't you taking care of me? Right?
Mhm.
Considering everything we had been through together until that point. Like it
Mhm.
was like ride or die, like me and my mom and me. Like, this is why I know how to braid hair and play spades and all these things. It was, I can cook, right? Because she taught me everything. And so for me, it was just like, well, how does that happen?
Mhm.
And that's when I was able to unpack all the trauma that she had. She
Mhm.
was abused as a child, and she had been through these things, and she never reconciled those things, and she blamed herself. And I learned that, like, on her deathbed,
Mhm.
for feeling like she was weak, and
Mhm.
that she forced me to have to be strong and fend for myself. And what I ended up doing, I ended up leaving my mother's house. I went to boarding school. I took whatever the first opportunity I could to move out of my mom's house. I ended up going away to boarding school at 14. That was my choice. That wasn't anything that she sent me to do.
Mhm.
I did the research. I did it, and I never lived with my mom again.
Mhm.
Because she was with this person, and over the years, it was very much like, all right, I can love you from afar because I can think about all the sacrifices and the things that you did to make sure that I had everything. Listen, this woman, my mother would not eat. Okay, my mother would. It didn't like my mother starved herself to make sure that I had food. When we lived in a tiny studio apartment, she made sure I had the bed. She slept on the couch. Like, my mother's clothes would be tattered. I had everything. You know what I mean? Like, that I knew that. And there's love there. But I can count on one hand the amount of times I heard my mother say I love you in my life,
Mhm. Mhm.
right? So I think that taught me that love is not just about what you say. It's about what you do.
Yeah.
And that people can only love to the best of what's in them. And so
Mhm.
one thing I will always say about my mom, and when she died, I think what I said to myself was, my mother loved me the best way she could.
Yeah.
And that's all right with me. And I think that when we got older, my mom died of pancreatic cancer.
Mhm.
And I was doing okay for myself. My mother actually just barely missed 9/11. She was supposed to be in one of the towers that day, and she wasn't because she had injured herself, and so she wasn't at work. So she barely missed that. And I was like, oh, this is some Final Destination shit. They gonna kill her.
Mhm.
But my mother ended up developing pancreatic cancer, and she
Mhm.
found out, and they gave her 6 months to live. And then I found out I was pregnant, and she started turning around. And they were
Mhm.
like, she was at Sloan Kettering. They were like, what is this?
Mhm.
What's going on? And I paid for all of her medical care. I did all of that stuff. She got to see her grandson be born, and that was wonderful. She died 6 months after my son was born.
Mhm.
But in that time, we had conversations. I was going to see her regularly, and we had these conversations.
Mhm.
And I was just like, why did you let that happen? And at first she was like, I didn't know.
Mhm.
Like, I did. And then it was, I wasn't strong enough. And so I tried to give you all these other things. And that was tough.
Mhm.
But in the end, I think that things were reconciled. And I walked away remembering that my mother loved me the best way she could. And that's what I think is important.
So I also asked our guest, who helped you define what love is, um, and not just define it, but gave you language
Mhm.
to express it. So your mom is primarily
Yeah.
there. Is there anybody else that added to that for you?
I absolutely think that my understanding of love comes through my liberation fight.
Mhm.
Um, because I grew up with trauma, like so much throughout my life that I really had gotten to a place where I was like, I was put on this earth to suffer,
Mhm.
and back in my Christian days, I was real messianic about it. I was like, maybe I'm just here to suffer and save the world. Who knows? Like, I really
Mhm.
just felt after everything that I'd been through that was my point. So I didn't believe that love was something that was
It's so
accessible to me.
funny because
Mhm.
after
What is
everything
that
that I've
echo?
been
That's you.
That's me. Am I
That's
echoing?
fine. No, no, no. It's fine. You're
Oh,
good.
sorry.
Go ahead.
My bad.
Mhm.
No, but I didn't know that love was something that was accessible to me.
Mhm.
And as I was doing this active, I've been an activist since I was 19. I'm 43 now.
Mhm.
Um, I was really fueled by anger a lot. And I was like, I can't do this because I'm angry. I have to do this coming from a place of love. And I realized that I just love my people so much. And I
Mhm.
want so much for us. And I started thinking about what that love was. And that's the kind of love you're willing to give your life for
Mhm.
other people. And when
Mhm.
you can connect with having a love for people that is that great and that deep that you're willing to die to help them, free them, make them happy, whatever, then that's what it is. And I started judging all my relationships by that. Am I willing to die for you?
Mhm.
And that became my understanding of what love meant for me.
Yeah,
So yeah, and that's across the board.
sure. Um, you grew up in your formative years were in New York?
Yeah, yeah. New York
I'm
City.
yeah, I'm so fascinated to talk to Black people who grew up in New York in the early 80s through
Yeah. Wow,
that,
it was great.
like hip hop
It's
and
awesome.
all of that. Just
Yes,
give me, I just please
yes,
just
yes.
describe what that was at
It's
that moment.
listen, because I'm writing, like, my next book is really about this. And like, you know, my agent, whatever, they were asking me, like, tap into something. When did you realize, like, basically, when did you fall in love
When did
with
you
hip
fall in love with hip
hop?
hop?
Right. But more, it was more like, when did you realize you were a part of this?
Mm,
And I was just like, gosh, there's so many memories
mhm,
that I could, tap into, because there was nothing like being in New York City in them streets when hip hop was coming about, because it wasn't just the songs that were on the radio. It wasn't just what was coming out of people's, radios that they were carrying. It was just the outlook on life. Like, it gave people hope at a time where, in New York in the 70s, listen, from the serial killers to the burning of buildings to
yeah,
the economic issues,
mm,
people in New York were suffering.
right.
And hip hop comes along and gives people something to live for, literally gives some people something to live for.
Yeah.
It gives all these people that can't get a job, can't go to college, can't whatever. It gave them something to feel important, and you felt it. You felt it in people. The way they walked, the swagger changed. The way they dressed like they loved themselves. They
Mhm,
dressed like it mattered. And growing up around that, it was just like, yo, I can be and do anything I want, and nobody could tell me nothing. And
mhm,
that's what hip hop was for me. Nobody can stop me. And I was listening because at first we were in Queens. So I'm listening to Salt and Pepper. I'm listening to Kid and Play and A Tribe Called Quest and De La Soul. And I'm listening to them and I'm feeling like, yo, like they really speaking to my soul. And then I moved to the Bronx and it's like, the Bronx was, I mean, every corner, every part, everything, you know? I mean, sidebar, I love that D Nice is getting his props. Brother grew up a few blocks from me. Like, you know what I mean? Like to see that kind of thing, it was just like, this is who we were. And I tell people there's nothing like that experience.
I bet. It sounds amazing.
And that's why I'm a hip hop scholar now. Like that's why to this day I'm studying and researching and writing and documenting this stuff because people can't ever forget that this happened. They can't ever forget that hip hop culture started with our people resisting against this, you know, colonialism and imperialism and this economic disenfranchisement. Like this was us saying no more, no more. And we got to remember that.
Yeah, hip hop has evolved into something that I suppose you look at it and you can't recognize it.
Depends on where you go.
Right.
Depends on where you go.
Yeah. So
if you go to France, you're gonna feel like you're in the Bronx in 1985.
But the way it has been co-opted here in the States or whatever, it seems like to me it would be very different for you and your perspective to look at it now from what you experienced and what you lived through during that time.
No, it's awful. It's awful.
Yeah.
It's awful. And I'm writing about that in this next book. It's just like hip hop has lost its way a while ago, but can't seem to get back on track. And the main reason is because of white people's ownership of it, right? So there is nothing that is ours in hip hop anymore. We're just players and pawns. And you look at, I'm not gonna name no names, but there were some major white male figures that were key to this destruction of this culture and making it into this mockery. And that's why now, like, none of it it's just awful. But when you step outside of the mainstream that they control, when you go into the underground and you go into the spaces that they can't reach and that they can't touch, when you go to the battle rappers, when you go to the underground clubs, when you go to the mixtapes and things, that's where you really see the possibilities. Like we haven't lost. It's on life support.
Right.
It's on life support. But you know.
Are there any artists that you dig now, or kind of when you listen to them, kind of reminds you of, oh, this is what this used to be for us?
No. Nope.
No, absolutely.
You know, and it doesn't mean that I don't like, you know, whatever, but like I can listen to Cardi B, I can listen to Meg Thee Stallion or whatever. They're gonna give us Foxy Brown and Kim. They're gonna give us that stuff. It's nothing new, right? It's what it is. I also don't listen to the radio, so that's a big part of it. You know, people will talk about J. Cole and Kendrick Lamar, and I'm like, they offer me nothing. There's nothing they're doing that's innovative to me. There's nothing new, and that's the thing about hip hop. Like integral to hip hop is innovation. Nobody's innovated anything in years. So when I went to like the Roots picnic, for example, and Rakim was on the stage, I'm like, this is still nobody's doing this still to this day.
There's only one. There's only one.
There's only one.
One of one with Rakim.
I saw Big Daddy Kane not long ago. I was like, nobody's doing this. No. You know, no. And they will try to dismiss that. And I'm like, yeah, all right. Like you are talking about this piggy went to the market. You know, what are you saying, man? Like, come on. I can't. Like, there's only and even with Meg, I was just having this conversation the other day. What is she gonna do after shaking her ass? Right? I love it, and I'm like super sex positive, and I support all of it. But what is your next step? Like, where do you go from here? Because she's still young. She's still in her early 20s.
Sure.
You're going to be 35 talking about dropping your stuff low.
Right.
Like, what are you gonna do? How do you grow? How do you evolve? And I don't see evolution for them.
Yeah, well, what we hope, right,
Mhm,
that as they mature as human beings,
mhm,
and I think with Meg particularly, because I know she just finished her degree program, and then she's
mhm,
talking about doing some more, and that's a
mhm.
developing yourself on another level that hopefully would add, that would broaden, um, and give more width to what you
Yeah.
have to talk about.
I hope she lets it go. I hope she lets this hip hop stuff go. Like for me, I always saw it's
Mhm.
like, okay, kind of like you doing this to pay your college tuition. Like I'll support
Mhm.
it, and I'm like with it. But
Right,
honestly, I think that she has potential to, girl, just go be a businesswoman or something. Like
right,
you don't
right.
have to do this. You don't
Yeah,
like you don't have to do this thing called
yeah,
hip hop. Or
yeah.
is it even hip hop? You don't have to rap, is what I'm saying.
Exactly.
Because what are you saying?
I think that there are more opportunities
Yeah.
for her to explore and to expand. Like we all been waiting on this Rihanna record. Some
It's
people were
not
waiting on
coming.
Rihanna
It's
for
not coming.
years.
It doesn't
But
need to. Auntie was perfection. She don't need to do nothing else for the rest of her
absolutely.
life.
But look at the other things that she's done,
But she's
in
done.
business, and use hip hop or
That's
use the
it.
genre as a way to kind of
That's
parlay
it.
that into other opportunities.
That's what I
Meg,
want from Meg.
yeah, Meg has the opportunity to
Yes,
do that, and so we,
absolutely.
I'm
That's
fine
what I want for her. And
with
even when you look at someone like Cardi, Cardi has all these like deals with these other companies, and she's doing apparel and she's doing fragrance and all this other kind of stuff. I think she's doing fragrance. I get confused, but
it.
doing these other things, cool. Take that and run with it. But
Yeah,
I'm just like, you and again, I don't want anybody to think I'm just focusing on the women because like these mumble rap, what the hell are you saying? Like, what are you going to do next? What is Migos going to do on their next album?
I like Migos. I get it. I know.
Of course,
I
you
get
like
it.
Migos. But what are the three amigos going to do on their next album?
Well,
Learn to articulate.
well,
That's the growth.
okay. Oh,
All
yeah.
right, I'm just asking
Okay,
questions.
yeah, no, 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 and they need to be asked. Who knows? But I think that, to your point, hip hop has evolved in a way in which, if you have the opportunities, and I think that's what separates um, some people from success, quote unquote,
Mhm.
is that they had the
Yeah,
opportunities that previous people did not have. Like
absolutely.
my thesis is Barack Obama wasn't the only black man in human history that had the capacity to be president. He was the only one who had the opportunity,
Mm-hmm.
and the path to get there.
And the
So
lineage.
exactly. And so I think that
You think they
now,
was going to elect a black man that wasn't raised by a white woman,
well, um,
whose black ass daddy abandoned them?
well, wait,
You
hold
didn't
on.
think that was going to happen, Patrick?
It would have happened. He could have had a black mother if he would have had a white wife. Like that, perhaps there
Yes.
needed to be
Yes.
something in there
Yes. No,
that
I hear
made
you
him
on
more
that.
palatable
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
some voters that he needed to have on
But
his
then they
side.
also hate black men soiling white women. So I don't know about that.
That would have been a thing.
I feel like part
Yeah,
of it
that would have been
was
a
the
thing.
fact that his black father had no real influence in his life and that he was raised by his white mother and wasn't like his stepfather like Asian or something like that.
He was from Indonesia.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
So
yeah.
culturally, they were not afraid because they didn't think that he had been like of the African descent.
Radicalized,
Yeah.
and yeah. Um, so let's do this. You mentioned this earlier, and I want to pick your brain about it. You said your mother was Christian,
Mm,
and that's how you was raised, and since
my
then,
family was.
yeah,
Yeah,
and since then you have divested
yeah,
from Christianity.
I have.
I am so fascinated.
I knew you was gonna do this.
No, no, no,
Oh
no,
my
no.
god.
We're talking, and
Well, I got alcohol in my cup.
no, we're talking, and I love to hear you think out loud. And so I'm really, because everybody's experience of
Yeah,
Christianity is not mine or somebody
right,
else's,
right, right.
right? And there are there are plenty of injury and traumas that happen in somebody's early stages when they were Christian as young and say, like, I don't want to do this anymore. I know I have friends that way. And so it's not a thing. I am interested in how you piece together your path to say, you know what, this doesn't work for me anymore, and I'm going to move on from it. Like, was there an incident, or were you just looking broadly and be like, this just doesn't work for me?
You know what? It's funny because, Facebook memories, they'll like let you know what you was thinking,
Right,
10,
right, they
15
do.
years ago.
Right.
And it's so funny when my Jesus posts come up because I was like, wow, I really believed that this would something would happen. But also realizing, I mean, again, most people are the religion they are because their parents were or their family was, right? Like, the average person isn't given a choice of like what religion they're going to
Sure.
be part of as a child. And then when you grow into something, it's what you are taught to do and to believe. And that's what happened with me. I was in Sunday school for Sunday service, Sunday evening service, Tuesday Bible study, Wednesday service, Friday youth night, vacation Bible school. I was doing all of that, and was also in a non-denominational church, charismatic preacher, and all that wonderful stuff. I started questioning things when my pastor revealed that he was HIV positive. And we came back the next Sunday and half the church was gone. Now, he got it through a transfusion from after a car accident, but we came back the next Sunday and half the church was gone. And I was like, oh, wow. I thought the Bible said we supposed to be the church. And then y'all just gonna leave because your pastor has HIV. And I was like, oh, okay. That was when I first started raising my eyebrow, but that didn't do it for me, right? I ended up going to boarding school. I was a singer, so I was in gospel choirs. I've been in 4 different gospel choirs in my life. Always loved that aspect of it, right? The music is always it. That's our African cultural memory is always going to be the music. But I think in boarding school, starting, to the education that I received, took classes in religion, and actually in my middle school, I was a private middle school, took a class on Christianity. My school was run by Catholic folks, and took a class on Christianity, and the teacher really encouraged us to question everything. And I was just like, okay, right. So I started like reading through, and things just weren't making sense to me. Namely the patriarchy of it. I didn't really understand patriarchy at the time, but I just felt like, what is this guy? Like, what is all this stuff that's negative about women? Like, why can't I do, like, why am I not allowed to do X, Y, and Z, right? So as I got older, would get into a lot of these conversations with folks. I still have this space, but I started slowly just kind of being like, I don't know about this book, y'all. Like, I'm like, I could vibe with God and I could vibe with Jesus and things like that, but this book, this ain't making no sense. And then y'all telling me that there's these other men that wrote it, and then you telling me that it was written like 20 generations after Jesus, and then you're telling me that it was, these people had to decide that he was a Messiah. Like, and I started like digging into the history around it, and I was just like, what is this? And y'all said this is supposed to be my sword, but this book actually is a sword stabbing me as a Black person, as a woman. And then I started looking at how it was being used, how Christianity was being used. So I'm, my bachelor's degree is in African American studies. So we start digging into, at least for us, we got to learn what Blackness existed, but slavery. And started really digging in. And that's when I realized I used to always think that Christianity was our original religion, and it's not, right? And then I was like, well, why are so many Africans Muslim? And then all of this, it really became about scholarship and studying and things like that. And I just kind of got to a point where I was just like, it does not make sense for us to believe this thing or to practice this religion that, in my opinion, or not in my opinion, that history has shown was used to oppress us. And even though we have adapted it to our ways of being, right? Like, come on, white people don't like being around Black Christians. Everything is just different for them, right?
It's clear now. Yeah.
I mean,
it's not even a.
and then also, like, I can't dismiss that the church was a central hub for activism and things like that, because that's the only place that white people would actually let us gather without being too nosy. right? So I understood that we had to use the church for these things. Like I started to understand that our people had to make concessions and had to kind of go along to get along. And I found in my, for me, I found Christianity to be one of those things that we kind of went along to get along. We had to take on this book. We had to take on this way of being so we wouldn't get whipped, so we wouldn't get beaten, so we could win favor, so that we could acclimate ourselves. Started studying Richard Allen, which I wrote a really great thing in a travel book about him and stuff like that. And I'm like, it seemed like assimilation to me. And I was like, for me, liberation is not assimilation. And so I was like, we can have whatever faith that we want. But when I started looking into what we used to practice and what we used to believe and stuff like that, and community and harmony and all these other things that didn't have to do with monotheism and it doesn't make sense to me. Like it just stopped making sense.
No, my questioning of my religion started when I was a teenager. I was singing in a choir, and we went out to Wheaton Christian College. At that time, of course, I didn't know what Wheaton Christian College and who started it and what it was. I know Billy Graham was heavily associated with it, and back then, Billy Graham was Billy Graham. Yeah, and so they had like this museum, and it took you through the history of evangelicalism from Europe to America. I had learned about Richard Allen in class before. Like I studied, I knew who Richard Allen was. I knew how important he was. But when I went
to Allen AME as a child.
So
Queens.
So when
they own half of Queens.
Right? Yeah.
Right.
So I'm going through this timeline, and it was all white faces.
Yeah.
And Richard Allen was not mentioned not one time. And I'm like, that's when it started, like the chips in it for me. Like, okay, how we are taught to express our religion and practice it is not how they see us and how we see them in terms of loving our neighbor. That's not really them. Like, they don't really practice that.
Because what y'all are practicing is African, Patrick.
Oh, I get it. Of course.
So here's my thing. I just like, y'all keep calling it Christianity, but it's like this much Christianity and this much African tradition.
Yeah.
So why do so many of us hold on to the Jesus factor?
Yeah.
When from the culture, from the rituals to the spiritual possession to the speaking in other languages to all of that stuff. It's African.
Well, let me ask you this. Divesting from that, is there room for faith in your life at all?
Absolutely there is.
Okay.
I don't have it, but there's room for it, right? Well, so here's the thing. Here's what I believe. I'll tell you, so that your folks, before they turn this off, and they're like,
"No, it's fine. We're good."
Every time I get somewhere where I talk about something, and then they find out, wow, she's not a believer. Oh my God,
it's fine. Don't worry about it.
I'll tell you what I do believe in. I believe in each other, right? So I believe in the deity Ma'at. I don't know if you're familiar, and other people, MA''AT. One of our earliest deities who represented justice, harmony, balance, reciprocity, community, love for each other. Our approach thousands of years ago was to live in this Ma'atic way. We build communities, everybody shows up in a community and contributes something. You can cook, you can plant, you can hunt, you can this, you can blah, blah, blah. It didn't matter what your gender was. It wasn't gender dependent, wasn't age dependent. It was all about what your contribution to your community was and how you showed up. We believed in equality and fairness. This is all documented. And I'm like, that's how we survived for thousands of years. We are the original humans, right? That's how we survived for thousands of years, living on that principle, right? And some people will say, you see the 42 principles of Ma'at and all that kind of stuff. And people say, well, that's where they got the 10 commandments from, or that's where they got this from, and all this kind of stuff. I mean, you could dig into that all you want, but the bottom line was, there was this way of being that we had before we were touched by Arab colonization, European colonization, in which we believed in each other and we believed in the spirit energy that circled through all of us because we were showing up and contributing and showing up for each other. That's what I believe in. I believe in that energy. I believe in that spiritual connection. I believe that we are all connected in that way, that if we all just show up and do our part, then we can all freely live our best lives. And unfortunately, because of greed and violence and tyranny and colonization, all these things like that, it's been disrupted.
Yeah.
Right? Across the world, it's been disrupted. If we could get back to that, it's there. I love African mythology. I love the Orisha. I love everything that has to do with that. I love learning about Ra and Imhotep and all these things. I love learning about Oshun and Yemaya and all these things. I love African mythology. I love all of that stuff. And I believe, and when people believe that, I don't even begrudge people having faith in the Christian God or the Judeo-Christian God, because I know it's what people need to sustain them, right? And I would never take that away from people because, my goodness, we go through enough.
Right.
So it would be sadistic to take that away.
Yeah.
But I will question it. And I will question, why do you hold on to this thing when we know, because of scholarship like what I do and others do, that there are other options?
Yeah.
And that's what I think happens with most religion, is that people they're not willing to explore that there's other options, there's other things to consider, there's other ways of being. Because, I mean, I don't know about you, but I grew up thinking that if I didn't do this, I would end up burning in the lake of fire for the rest of my life.
Well, yeah, I've had plenty of those conversations.
And
trauma associated to.
And when it comes to Judgment Day, I'm going to be judged. And I was like, oh my God, really?
It's pretty exhausting.
Like, really?
Yeah.
And then I'm just like, wait, y'all telling me though I can do all the shit that I want to do, but on my deathbed, I can be like, I repent. I'm sorry, Jesus, let me in. And it's going to be all right?
I was like, it's kind of complicated, right?
Yeah, like, to me, I was just kind of like, let me go do this drug real quick. Like,
it gets kind of a little.
Jesus forgives,
right?
So it would be things like that I would just be like, okay, well, and then it's always the whole, all right, well, if God is omnipotent and Jesus is loves all of us and cares for us, why are we suffering? Why are Black people especially suffering more than anybody else?
Yeah.
Right? Like, these are just the things.
No, I think those are great questions.
They just don't make sense. I'm like, right now, coronavirus, over 1 million people in the United States alone died.
Yeah.
Where was God?
Where was God in all of that?
Where was God? Where's this God that you all, like, so many different people call different names and believe in different things, still referred to as a him? When the Europeans came up with this idea of him and her.
We'll get into it. We'll get into all of that.
To me, I was just like,
yeah.
Where's that God right now? Right now, like.
Let me do this. Let's shift. I want to go back to your formative years. And I didn't know you went to boarding school. I think that's horribly interesting. And I totally believe you did all the research and registered yourself and moved yourself. Like, I totally believe all of that.
I was in a scholars program, and they facilitated me getting into that particular school and going. There was a boarding school in New Jersey called the Lawrenceville School.
What was taking your understanding of connection, relationship, love that you learned very early on, then you start dating in your teenage years and all of that. What was that space like? That space like for you?
I wasn't dating none of them crackers.
Okay. Yeah, no, I get it. No, I'm not talking about the people you weren't dating.
So it's interesting. It's interesting because I was going to this prep school in Jersey, right? So I extracted myself from the Bronx, and when I would visit back and talk with folks or whatever, because these were still my people or whatever, it would always be like, well, what's it like, or you think you're better than us, and and I'm an Aries, so there was part of me that was like, yeah, but then there was also the part of me that was like, come on, it's just me or whatever. I didn't do much dating. I was the fat girl. I was a tall fat girl. I was 6 feet tall and like
Mhm.
250 pounds when I was 12. Nobody wanted me. I wasn't light skinned. Don't let this light shining on me fool you. I wasn't light skinned. I ain't had no curly hair. I wasn't desirable or whatever. The first person that I had any sexual relationship with was a predator, right? He was like 8 years older than me. I was 16, he was 24. He knew damn well he wasn't supposed to be messing with me. But you're at 16 and you thinking that, well, yeah, I'm smarter than other people. I'm more mature. Look at me. I'm going away to school, all these other things. You're not thinking, whatever.
Mhm.
So that was my first experience, like kind of, being seriously involved with somebody or, whatever. And that definitely affected how I would go forward with a lot of my, dating and relationships and that kind of thing.
Um, I'm interested in, did that one relationship at 16, how did it define men for
Mm.
you
It
and
didn't.
how you engaged
It didn't
with
define
them?
men for me.
Mhm.
It showed me a lot about what I was capable for. I had gotten pregnant, had an abortion.
Mhm.
So, I was one of those teenagers that, had an unwanted pregnancy
Mhm.
because he refused to use protection. Just wasn't his thing.
Mhm.
Um, and he didn't define men for me, but he awakened my eyes to the fact that men could be disgusting. Because what 24-year-old is dealing with a 16-year-old?
Mhm.
And I would later find out that like something like for girls that get pregnant from ages 14 to 17, it's like at least 50% of them are with a guy that's over 18. And of those, at least 40% is a man over 21 or 25 or some shit like that. So
Mhm.
you got a lot of nasty ass men out there, right?
Mhm.
But I couldn't just write it off like that. I had to dig deeper.
Mhm.
And being somebody who studies our people, what I came to understand was that historically, we have a very warped sense of relationships and sexual engagement because of what we went through, particularly with enslavement, right?
Mhm.
Where
Mhm.
there are these slave masters that were forcing men to have sex with their own daughters, their sisters, their mothers, all of
Mhm.
those kinds of things, those very disgusting things where these slave owners were buying children
Sure.
to do those kinds of things with. So our perception of what was so-called normal and acceptable was either skewed by centuries of abuse or shaped by their ideas of patriarchy and what relationships are supposed to look like. So
Mhm.
it wasn't that I was making excuses for these predators in our community. I don't make excuses for people like R. Kelly or anything like that. But we have to understand why these things happen. That's the
To
sociology.
contextualize
So we can
behavior.
contextualize and then fix. You
And
can't fix something if you don't understand why it's happening.
sure.
And so what I started realizing was that patriarchy had really taken hold of our people, and our men started really believing that they had to plant their flag first. That's why all these conversations about body counts and she's for the streets and all these things. There's something that they truly believe that a woman loses value with every sexual partner she has. So they tend to go for the younger ones with the lower chance of having been with anyone. And
Mhm.
once I began to understand that, I was like, okay. And that's why I'm an anti-ageism activist now, because I see how, when like I said, I'm over 40, I'm 43. We are not considered desirable because we're not, once you get past a certain age, a woman is no good. They want to get these young girls. It's like, well, why y'all want these young girls? You ain't got nothing in common with them, but it came from that. So I started thinking men can be quite disgusting. They can be predatory. They can be whatever. Not all of them,
Mhm.
but society encourages it, right? It really encourages men and boys to have very twisted, warped senses and understandings of sex and sexuality and relationships.
And yeah, one of the things that I'm not sure how it shaped my thinking. Well, I remember going to see What's Love Got to Do with It,
Mm,
Angela and Bassett and Larry Fishburne, and this is like 91,
mm,
92. So if that's the case, I am sophomore, junior,
yeah,
and it was I remember it being very traumatic for me. Um, because I didn't live in a house like that. And
Mm,
so this was my first time seeing what a man could do to a woman.
mm,
And I am questioning, I remember in the theater feeling very arrested, like I'm watching this, but I can't move because I'm not sure what's happening. I'm
yeah.
not sure why it's happening. Um, I came from a little, space in middle of Chicago for black people that was like a little suburb. Everything was really sanitized and it was a beautiful, safe space to live in. But being introduced to that kind of trauma and the idea of what a man could do to a woman
Mhm.
totally
Yeah.
blew my mind. And of course I didn't come out of it processing it with anybody because we were kids and
Right,
we didn't have language.
right.
um and I didn't talk about it with my parents because, for whatever reason. And so add to that, if that's 91, 92, by the time 96, 97, I remember being in the church service and this old bishop was talking, and he was talking about his trauma, and he was talking about his abusive father.
Mm,
And he says that his father had sex with his daughter, and the reason he did was because he said, before anybody else have it, I'm gonna have it because it's mine. That
yeah,
whole kind of
yeah,
patriarchal thing.
yeah.
And I sat in church and I didn't know what to, like, is this really happening? Like, it is just like, do people really do these things to
Yeah.
each other? And then of course you grow and you
You
see
see people like T.I. want to be in the room while his daughter is being inspected to make sure
what,
she has a hymen. It's disgusting.
like,
It's disgusting.
we're really twisted in
Yeah.
ways I don't think that we.
Well, we don't think about it because it always people say, oh, it's gender wars. And it's like, it's not gender wars, y'all.
Yeah.
If we can't even talk about these things
Mhm.
without people feeling personally offended or blamed or whatever, we can't talk about these things. How are we gonna fix it? How do we, like, I wrote in Time magazine, and this is, I was, if not the first person, but one of the first people to write in a major publication that black men are 67% more likely to experience domestic violence than white men.
Mhm.
It's like, why are we not talking about that? And
Mhm.
where the heart of that comes from. So part of it was, including gay men in that. So they're being, harmed by other men.
Mhm.
But some of it was also coming from, the women that they were involved with. And I'm like, y'all, they see our relationships as inherently violent because that's how they see us. And we have violence in our relationships. Why? And you have to trace it back and you'd be like, when did we start to understand what it meant to be romantically involved with people or to be connected? What examples did we have? What did we grow up seeing?
Mhm.
All of those kinds of things. And we're not supposed to talk about these things. So a
Mhm.
lot of folks grew up in households where women were being beaten. My grandmother was being beaten by my grandfather. My mother and her sisters grew up seeing that. Like this is it was commonplace. And he was and they were his second family.
Mhm.
So we ain't gonna talk about that. Like they were his side family.
Yeah.
So we have why what would prompt the man to do that? What would prompt a man to do that? And we had to think about these things. This is
Sure.
trauma. This is deep generational trauma.
It's systemic, it's structural,
It's systemic, it's
yeah,
structural, it's
all of those
everything.
things. Yeah.
Walking around the streets of Philadelphia and seeing these mothers cursing their 1-year-olds out, calling them every kind of MFer and dumb this and da 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 da. And I'm like, and you only really see it in the poorer neighborhoods. And so for me, ding, 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 light goes off. What's going on in our
Mhm.
most impoverished neighborhoods where people are just, there's so much anger and rage and they are taking it out on each other.
Yeah.
We have to understand this in order to be free. And that's what I'm on. That's what my activism is. That's what my scholarship is about.
Mhm.
That's what I'm focused on. Like, how do we free
Untangle
ourselves
ourselves. Yeah. Yeah.
of what was done to us? Because we were not like this.
Mhm.
We were not like this.
Mhm.
And how do we get back?
So here's what happened for me. I go to see what's love got to do with it, and I came out and says, I'm not that man,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I don't want to be that man.
Yeah.
But for those of you who are listening, I refer to her and I've told her this. She is a muse for me. Feminist is a muse for me because she helps me get out of my head and helps me think through some things critically that as a man I'm 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 not conscious to. I used to call myself a feminist.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm for the woman. I am for black women. I see that in some of the examples that I've had. I see that in Jesus for myself, that he was a great emancipator of women. You told me I can't be a feminist,
Mm-hmm.
and that I actually as a man can't be an ally.
Mm-hmm.
And in some ways I get disoriented. Well, how can I support? Do I need to identify? Do I need a name? Or can
Yeah,
I just be and be like,
be
I
a good
support,
person.
yeah, just be support
That's
I just support black women and women in my life. Yeah.
it.
And then
Can I explain to your listeners why I say that?
yes, please.
Okay. A white person can't be a black liberationist because they have nothing to gain from that. This is a fight that has to come from the person that is being oppressed, the people that are being oppressed, right? White people can support our efforts by not being oppressors, by challenging each other, calling out racism when they see it, not engaging in it in their, in their employment and education and things like that. Like white people can just be better people and go about it that way, and stop inviting your racist uncle over for Thanksgiving. These are the things that white
The
people
little things, right? Just
right, the little things. Freire teaches us that. He said, the oppressed have to free themselves. That is not the responsibility of the oppressors have to free themselves. That's not the responsibility of the oppressed. But the oppressed also have to free ourselves.
Yeah.
And it's not for us to rely on the benevolence of the oppressor. And so it's very hard for black men to see themselves as oppressors, obviously, because, the racial things like, and all that kind of stuff that goes on. But when you look within our communities, we have some of the most disproportionate rates of rape, sexual violence, domestic violence, intimate partner, all that stuff, child abuse, everything. And I'm like, come on, you know what I mean? If we act like nobody else exists, black men are still killing us 3 times more than white men are killing their women. Black men are still beating us, 7 times more than white men are beating their women. So there's some oppression happening there. Where it comes from, we can talk about where it comes from. That doesn't change the fact that it's still happening, right? So as a woman, as a black woman, I have to fight for myself in some ways. Like I have to be the one to be like, I was able to free myself. We didn't need your help. Because if we believe that we need your help, then it means we're accepting that we are inferior to you. We are not inferior. We have been inferiorized, if that's a word. We have been put into this position, but that's not who we are. Same for black folks. It's like, I don't need your benevolent whiteness. I need you to correct yourselves on that side, but you don't have to come hold my hand. We got this. We can do for ourselves. Now you can be supportive and be part of our movements and show up and these things like that. But you don't have to slap a name on yourself. You don't have to call yourself an ally. You don't have to get cookies, a pat on the back, on the back, a thank you for being here. I'm thanking you for being here. You should have been here. A good person would be here, period. And a lot of times in these activist spaces, people want props. They want congratulations. They want acknowledgement for doing what you should be doing as a human being. And that's why I always go back to my heart. I was like, if we'd had this harmony and balance and justice and reciprocity and all of this stuff, we would not have to be, nobody would be like, I'm an ally. I'm going to the Pride Parade and putting ally on my face. What are you doing? Just being there is enough. Remember the white man that was marching with the brothers and he didn't hold the I am a man sign because he understood that was not his fight. He understood the world recognized him as a man, so he didn't need to hold that sign. I was like, be like that guy. That guy's that's kind of what that is.
No, and I appreciate you have talked me through that.
Well, I have to talk your audience through it too.
Yeah, no,
Thank you.
I came in contact with bell hooks, and you were horribly critical of me and bell hooks.
I'm not horribly overly critical of her. I just said that she's every man's favorite feminist.
Right. Because
she's really nice to y'all.
Well,
there's nothing wrong with that.
Don't do that. Yeah. No.
There's nothing wrong with that.
She gives us a way. She gives us language. Yeah. And she compassionately talks to us.
She wasn't always like that though.
She wasn't. By the time I engaged her.
Yeah, no, y'all don't read her old shit. Y'all don't read the stuff where she was calling y'all everything but a child of God.
Yeah, I haven't. Yeah,
y'all read all about love forward.
Oh, it's just wonderful, isn't it? It's just great. It's
when
just
she said, you know what? I give up. I'm gonna be nice. I'm gonna be grandma nice and write very grandma books.
I'm interested though.
No, all jokes aside, no, I however you get it.
Sure.
That's all I need.
What role can men play to support not just the women in our lives, but the women everywhere? Or do you even need that support?
So we need to. I'm a harm reductionist, so we need to stop the harms that are happening, right? Mm-hmm. And that's what men can do. They can stop harming us. First and foremost, stop beating, stop raping, stop abandoning children, stop stealing money. All the things that Black men do to Black women that harm us disproportionately, they can stop. Just stop. That's not going to happen though, because it is an overcompensation to perform manhood. And so they're looking to how white men have been, and they're looking to the power that white men have. And they know they can't achieve it through traditional means because white men make sure that they can't. So they scramble for other ways to do it. And it's an overcompensation that leads to violence, a violent assertion of power, a violent assertion of domination, a violent assertion of manhood. Mm-hmm. You have to stop that. And those who do not do it, right? Like, so you watch this movie and you said, I'm not going to be that. And that's not enough. It's not enough to not hit a woman and to not rape a woman. You have to think about how you process these things. And you and I, we had an exchange recently where I was just like, yo, what are you doing? And I was really like, no. It's beyond just I don't do this to women, so I'm good. I got to understand why this is a problem. And I got to make sure that the people around me are also not doing it. I got to make sure I'm not making excuses for people that do it. I got to make sure I'm not engaging in microaggressions or gaslighting, but and those kinds of things. And that's the hard part. The men that I'm close to in my life, the most of the men I'm close to in my life do not have close male friends. They can't stand to be around them, right? Or I should say cisgender heterosexual men, right? They can't stand to be around them. They can't stand to listen how they talk about women, how they talk about their approaches to life, just their ways of thinking and being, what they think it means to be a man. They can't stand to be around it. That says something. I think Black men, men of the African diaspora need to figure out what it means to be a man on our terms. Because right now, y'all are living on white men's terms. What does it mean? You want power? A man has power. A man has prowess. A man has progeny. A man protects women, and a man has property. Okay, these are the 5 major tenets of manhood, and it's what brothers subscribe to. It's like, no, you gotta let that go, bro. That's not what being a man is.
I am more conscious of ways in which masculinity is a performative expression.
So is femininity.
Yeah, but I'm recognizing it in ways in which it is harmful to me.
Yes.
Right? The way that I have performed out my idea of what it means to be a man or all these things. And I don't know if it's because I'm older now and I'm tired of performing,
It's exhausting.
I didn't realize how exhausting.
You gotta keep up with
it. And perhaps I don't have the energy that I used to have. And so it causes me to rethink those things about my own self. I'm interested in the time in which we live, and I'm gonna let you go because I promise we keep this. We're over, but just
Oh
give me
no,
a
you
few
got,
minutes.
I'm here, bro.
I'm interested in you looking at the landscape, the political landscape,
Mm,
especially with Roe v. Wade and
mhm,
everything that I perceive is coming down
mhm.
the pike.
Yeah.
What role do Black women play in the world right now,
Mm,
or should they even want to play in shaping all? Should we just go back, try to create something? Because you've talked about moving overseas a few times. We've
oh
had
yeah.
those kind of conversations. So do we abandon this space that we're in, or do you think there's some structural work that we can do to make this space that we're in right now better?
You asked what role does black women play
What do you
first?
think? Yeah,
Complete
yeah.
pawns. We're complete pawns.
Mm,
We have no power at all. And it's actually gotten to a place of like my cynical entertainment watching Black women think that they're making a difference in this political space because they're not. The way they were going on about this Supreme Court, I was like, okay. What is going to change about
mhm,
the Supreme Court of the United States with
mhm,
Ketanji Brown Jackson on it?
mhm,
Nothing, because they're lifetime appointments. Ain't nobody going nowhere no time soon. So it's a 6-3 court. She's
mhm,
not going to do nothing other than be part of whatever's coming down the pipe. That's her legacy. She's going to be on the court that is going to continue to strip us of our human rights. And even if she were, and if it was a 5-4 majority, even if
mhm,
she was on that side, what would she be doing?
mhm,
Nothing. Because the Supreme Court should not exist. Right? And the forefathers, they wrote about this stuff too. They were like, they were like the Constitution needs to be rewritten every 20 years, and all these kinds of things that nobody pays attention to.
mhm,
I hate to see Black women as cops and prosecutors and judges, all these things. I'm like, all you're doing is upholding the same system that literally was created to oppress us, to subjugate us, to marginalize anyone who is not a white cisgender heterosexual man. All you're doing is playing part of that. I ask people all the time, they say, well, you got to be in the system to change it. I say, give me one damn example of people who have been able to infiltrate the United States system, justice system, government, anything, and actually make some change. Hasn't happened. You cannot name a single time that the system has been changed from within. So that's an old, centuries old, tired lie. Black women are pawns. We are used for clout, for street cred, to get the numbers, to get the support. They give us nothing in return. The vice president they have, come on, what does she do? Nothing. Nothing. And so I don't believe in any of it anymore. I'm just like, oh, and if you study the history of the world, most countries that have existed for a long time, around the 250-year mark, they collapse because every nation building is a social experiment. It fails because they all start out wrong, right? And the United States started out wrong. It's founded on genocide, sexual violence, racism, torture, slavery, all these things. What good can come of a country when it loses roots? The whole thing needs to be implode, explode, whatever, completely eradicate everything, start over from the ground up. And I hope that Black women are not charged with doing the labor, because we birthed this damn nation, right?
mhm,
We birthed all the laborers they needed to build this nation, right?
mhm.
All those, no, I want no part of it. Yes, I am definitely looking to move overseas. I'm looking to look. Du Bois left,
They
Teray left,
did. Yeah,
Nina Snow
he
left,
got
Baldwin
out.
left.
They
How
did.
many they left? They
They
got to
did.
a point they was like, oh no.
Yeah, they bounced. They did.
They were like, not gonna happen in my lifetime, maybe.
Mhm,
And I think had King and X lived, they would have left as well.
mhm,
Had they not been assassinated, I think they all would have left as well.
mhm,
And that's okay. why would we have any nationalism? Why would we have any national pride? What has America ever done to inspire nationalistic pride among Black people? The best parts of America come from us.
Yeah.
So when Black people are like, I'm proud to be an American, I'm like, what does that mean?
It's a little problematic.
It's problematic. What does it mean?
It's as problematic as me. I went to when I was in DC. I went to the King Monument, and I was like, "Oh, this is beautiful." But y'all shot the dude. Like, this is why we're here. Like, had he lived, like we wouldn't
be here.
we wouldn't have this. So this is really complicated.
When
like,
the CIA and FBI post about him,
right? Like,
on Dr. King Day,
but like, word he was in, tried to break up his marriage. I'm like,
word.
This is very complicated.
And it's interesting because you got like these foundational Black Americans who are very anti-immigrant and things like that. I'm about the African diaspora. I'm about all of our people. Honestly, we all are from the same place. You got off on one boat sooner. You got off on another boat.
That's the only thing that really separates us. That's it.
It's a land that don't belong to us any damn way. Yeah. So I've always been like, why does none of that matters, right? So for me, we all African, we are all descendants, we are all of that. And we have to think like, what are we going up for? These foundational Black Americans or whatever, and they're like, we have the right to claim, da, 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 da. Okay, yeah, you do. But why do you want to? Why do you want to claim a constitution that was written and included your enslavement in it? Why do you want to claim a constitution that when it was written, it included the oppression of women? Why are these the things that you want to hold on to? Why do you want to claim a Declaration of Independence and celebrate the 4th of July when it was written by slave owners? Come on, man.
It's so complicated being Black.
And I'm just like, I say African American the same way that I say, because I think that it's important the same way I'll say like African Cuban or African, Colombian or whatever. It's like that idea, like Afro-American, Afro-Colombian, it's the same thing. Our origin place is with African culture. That is who we are. Sure. Where we ended up is where we ended up. That's where the American comes in. But there's no pride there for me. You never see me pledge allegiance to the flag, sing the national anthem, wave a flag, none of that, because this is not, I have nothing here. So yeah, I'm definitely looking to move. And I don't engage politically anymore, like not like how I used to. I tried for a while, and I know people, I had a big platform and I tried to do some things, but I think like in the last couple of years, I was just like, no, I'm good.
I get it.
I'm good.
Before I let you go, I got 5 quick questions that I ask all our guests for you. But before we do that, though, I want you to talk about Sankofa and the modules and studies and what that is. Talk to us about that.
So I started my own school called the Sankofa Summer School. I launched it last year, and we're in our 2nd year now, launching on Monday. And basically what it is an opportunity for people to receive Afrocentric education. And what is Afrocentric education? It is receiving information and knowledge from a perspective that centers us, right? It's not what you learn in school. It's our people teaching about our things. And we have classes like African womanism. We have classes on Beyond Tuskegee, looking at the medical trials in the Black communities. We have somebody who's doing something, a nuanced look at the Haitian Revolution, somebody looking at gender and sexuality in West Africa. These are like somebody who's doing one on eminent domain and talking about the 40 acres and a mule, kind of dispelling myths about that. So we have a bunch of different classes, Afrofuturism, everything, taught by experts and leaders in their fields. And so it's basically one class every night. People were able to sign up for single classes, bundles. We had a lot of people registered to take all of them. We have 14 this year. I'm very happy. Last year we had 9. And it's virtual. People come 7:00 Eastern time. They come, they log on, and they're getting, a workshop, a class from, somebody about a different topic. And I wanted to do this because I'm like, you're not learning this in school. Not in elementary, junior, high school, college for a lot of people. And why not? We need more of these kinds of experiences. We need more of these kinds of community-based schools, more Afrocentric education. thing, this whole thing about CRT was really driving me up the wall. I was just like, oh my goodness, they're
Right.
using CRT as a euphemism for Black studies, or and I'm just like, what the hell? So
Mhm.
this is my way of kind of pushing back and contributing more, and I'm really excited about it. Unfortunately, registration closed last night.
Could you say that again?
Okay.
Oh, actually, shut up. Siri is all of my business. Registration closed last night, but people can go to sankofasummerschool.com and sign up to get updates for the future. This year, we are welcoming high school students for free. And so we received a lot of donations from people. You can still donate because there's people that we need to subsidize their education, because we didn't want to turn anybody away.
Mhm.
So people came and said, I don't have the money for it. I was like, we got you. So please feel free to go and donate.
That's amazing.
Thank you.
That's so dope. You're dope.
Thank you.
And
I appreciate it. You're dope too.
yeah, I'll get there. So here are my questions, and
Yes.
I'll let you go.
Okay.
Do you believe in love at first sight?
No.
Okay.
What?
Next question. What do you believe about love?
I believe that it can be abundant. I believe it's individual. And I believe that in order for people to connect and share love, they have to be aligned in their ideas about love and their experiences with love.
Okay. Next question. What do you know about love now that you didn't know then?
Then being when?
Before.
Before was an hour ago.
Okay. If you've learned something about love, I get it. Okay, when you were in your 20s. How about
that? So I understand that I'm on the aromantic spectrum, which I didn't understand back then. I didn't know there was a name for it. But I also understand that love is abundant and can be shared with multiple people romantically at one time.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's why you're teaching a class on polyamory.
I'm teaching a class on polyamory. I study it, I live it. So yeah.
Cool. Next question then. What is a good lover?
A good lover. Wow. A good lover, I think, is someone who is in tune with you in multiple ways. Mentally, spiritually, physically, emotionally. They are in tune with what makes you feel good. And they know how to engage you in these various ways to make you feel good. There's somebody who is committed to bringing you pleasure, committed to showing you love through their actions and words and all that good stuff. Yeah. And somebody who, when you spend time around them or whatever kind of engagement you have, you walk away feeling good.
Great. Last question. Where do you find joy?
Lately it's honestly been my teenage kid who drives me up the wall, but it's so joyful to watch him just be a teen and become himself. Like, oh my gosh, he's gonna be 16 in a couple of months.
Wow.
And it's so fabulous. I miss him. He's gone for the summer. And like I text him, I'm all corny. I'm like, what are you doing? I miss you. But when he's here, I'm like,
right.
But he's brilliant. He's so creative. He produces music. He writes screenplay. Like, he's just so awesome, and he's just so awesome. So I find definitely joy in being his mom. And that was never my plan. I never wanted to have kids. I never wanted to be married or anything like that. So this was a surprise to me that I would find so much joy in this. Yeah, that's really, I find joy in my gardening and my planting. That's why I was at Home Depot before I came back here. My gardening, my planting is really my refuge, and so much joy the plants give me. Look at my baby right here.
I get it. No, I get it.
Beautiful. It's not even fake, Patrick. It's a real plant. Look at the lushness. Look at it. It's shining, moisturized.
I know.
Like, I got Vaseline slathered on his face by a black mama. Look at my baby.
Thank you for hanging out.
Thank you for having me. kidding me?
There's so much more we could have talked about,
There's
but
so
you
much
have
more.
to.
We didn't talk about Prince. We didn't do
No,
nothing.
yeah. Well, you had to come back. You had to
Okay.
come back, and
Next season.
absolutely. Thank you for taking time. I love you very much.
I love you.
I'm glad that you're good and you're doing all of the things that amazes me and amazes everybody. So keep doing what you're doing. Let people know where they can connect with you on social media.
I am Feminista Jones everywhere. Facebook is Feminista Jones Official. Twitter is Feminista Jones. Instagram is Feminista Jones. Follow me there. My goal by the end of the summer is to have my website back up. It's under construction and has been for like a year for various reasons, but I'm going to have that done by the end of the summer. But yeah, just follow me on social media. I'm also a public speaker, so if anybody wants to reach out about that, feel free to do so. I'll direct you to my agent. Cool. And buy my books. Buy my books. This is my last one, Claiming Our Space.
Great book. I read it.
Thank you.
Great book. I read the other one.
Push the button.
I got a copy. I got my.
I got books.
I got my copy.
And you can always support that. Thank you.
Thank you for coming. Thank you for hanging out. Thank you for everybody that's rocked with us for all this time with this. I hope you were enlightened and even blessed by our conversation. So take care of yourself and each other, and I'll see you again for another episode of the Love Again podcast. Bye-bye.
Bye.